I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I used to think my life was pretty straightforward. I was married to Sarah for 6 years. We had a couple of kids, a nice house in the suburbs, and everything seemed perfect from the outside. But as it turns out, things were far from perfect. In the months leading up to the discovery, I noticed small changes in Sarah. At first, I brushed them off as the usual stresses of life, work, kids, that sort of thing. She started coming home late more often, claiming she was tied up at the office. When she did come home, she was often distracted, glued to her phone like it was a lifeline. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me the same vague responses, deflecting the questions with a practiced ease that made me uneasy. One evening, I came home early from work, excited to surprise her with dinner. As I walked into our living room, I saw her sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. I remember that laugh. It was the same laugh she used when we first started dating. But the moment she saw me, it faded into this forced smile. Something shifted in the air. It felt like this invisible wall had gone up between us. Over the next few weeks, I began to put the pieces together. I started noticing unfamiliar names popping up in her texts, and I could have sworn I saw her texting someone during dinner. There were times when I'd ask her who she was talking to, and she'd get defensive, saying things like, "It's just work stuff, Jake. Can't you give me a break?" But here's the thing, I knew my wife. I knew when she was hiding something, and that defensiveness felt like a red flag. Then came the turning point. One day, while looking for some paperwork in her home office, I found a receipt for a restaurant over an hour away from our house. The date was only a few weeks prior, and she had claimed to be at a work dinner that night. My gut dropped. I immediately searched through her things, and that's when I discovered the messages. I don't remember too much of the details, but I do remember the gut-wrenching feeling of betrayal as I read through the exchanges filled with flirty banter and, to my horror, plans to meet up. The final nail in the coffin was when I recognized the name of the man she was messaging, my lawyer, Greg. I was both shocked and furious. My mind raced as I pieced it all together, the late nights, the secrecy, the defensiveness. I was living a lie, a complete farce. I called her out that evening. When Sarah walked through the door, I was ready. I confronted her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who the hell is Greg?" I demanded, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought I might actually see fear in her eyes. "What are you talking about, Jake? He's my attorney. We've been discussing the divorce," she replied, but the lie rolled off her tongue too easily. "Divorce? Is that what you think this is?" I couldn't contain the anger anymore. "Because it sounds more like you've been screwing my lawyer behind my back." She tried to deny it, of course, throwing out excuses about how it was just business. But deep down, I could see the cracks forming in her facade. The confrontation spiraled into a mess of accusations and tears. I felt like I was in a twisted game of chess, and she was trying to outmaneuver me with each lie she told. I couldn't believe how effortlessly she could twist the truth. I was left feeling hollow yet furious, my chest heavy with the weight of betrayal. I knew I had to act, but the question was how. I had two choices, to fight back or to let her win. And that's when it hit me. If she thought she could take advantage of me using my own lawyer, she had another thing coming. With a newfound determination, I decided I was going to find a better attorney, one who could help me destroy her in court. The stage was set, and I was ready to turn the tables. As I made my plans, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry, yes, but there was also a sense of clarity. I was done being the victim in this twisted game. It was time to take control and show her that this wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. But revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was just getting started. After that explosive confrontation, I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. I could hardly sleep as images of Sarah and Greg laughing together danced in my head. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. The next morning, I decided to take action, not just for myself, but for our kids, who deserved better than to watch their parents tear each other apart. I started by researching attorneys online, looking for someone who specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for being tough. After a few hours of digging, I found the perfect candidate, a woman named Lisa. She came highly recommended on multiple forums, known for her no-nonsense approach and fierce dedication to her clients. With a mix of anxiety and hope, I called her office and set up a consultation for the very next day. When I met Lisa, she was everything I needed. She was sharp, focused, and exuded a confidence that immediately put me at ease. As I explained my situation, detailing the affair with my wife and my former lawyer, she listened intently, taking notes and nodding along. I could feel the weight of my anxiety lifting as she reassured me with her expertise. "I'll make sure we get through this," she told me, her eyes locking onto mine. "You deserve to come out on top, Jake. We'll build a strong case." With every word she spoke, I felt a sense of empowerment that had been missing since my world had been turned upside down. I was no longer the passive husband. I was a man on a mission. Together, we devised a strategy to gather evidence and prepare for the battle ahead. In the following weeks, I became consumed with the divorce proceedings. I documented every interaction I had with Sarah, collecting text messages and emails that showed her dishonesty. I even hired a private investigator to corroborate my suspicions about her time spent with Greg. I wanted to paint a clear picture for the court, showing that Sarah's actions were not just an indiscretion but a deliberate betrayal of our family. As I dove deeper into this new chapter of my life, I felt a mix of anger and resolve. I was mourning the loss of my marriage while simultaneously planning the downfall of the woman I once loved. It felt surreal, but I knew I had to keep my emotions in check. No matter how much I wanted to scream at her or throw things, I had to maintain my composure. I was fighting for my children and my future. Then one day, I received a call from Lisa that sent my head spinning. "Jake, I have some news about your case," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "I've got a chance to secure some critical evidence that will strengthen our position. I need you to be available for a meeting with the investigator this weekend." I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was time to turn the tables. I cleared my schedule and prepared for the weekend, knowing this could be a turning point in the case. My heart raced with anticipation as I thought about finally being able to confront Sarah with the truth. The day of the meeting arrived, and I met the investigator at a small coffee shop. He was a rugged man with a knowing look in his eyes, and he immediately got down to business. "Here, what I've found. I followed Sarah around for a few days, and it seems she's been meeting up with Greg not just for legal matters but for personal ones," he revealed, sliding over a stack of photographs that made my blood boil. There they were, captured in candid shots. Sarah and Greg at a restaurant, holding hands, sitting too closely together, and laughing like they were more than just a lawyer and his client. The investigator also handed me a USB drive with recorded audio from their conversations. I felt the anger bubbling to the surface again, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my goal. Armed with this evidence, I went back to Lisa, feeling like I had a powerful new weapon. We meticulously prepared for the upcoming court hearings, strategizing how to present the evidence in the most impactful way. I knew this was my chance to make Sarah face the reality of her actions. As court day approached, I felt a blend of anxiety and determination. I wanted to walk into that courtroom not just as a husband seeking revenge, but as a father fighting for his children's well-being. The stakes were high, and the thought of facing Sarah across the aisle sent chills down my spine, but I wouldn't back down. It was time to show her that I was not the pushover she thought I was. The day before the court appearance, I had an unexpected encounter with Sarah. She called me, sounding frantic. "Jake, can we talk? I think we need to work this out for the kids," she pleaded. I almost laughed at her desperation. The audacity. "You've got some nerve," I replied, feeling a surge of anger. "This isn't about working things out. You made your choice when you decided to cheat on me with my lawyer. There's nothing left to discuss." Her silence on the other end was deafening, and for the first time I felt a shred of satisfaction. She was facing the consequences of her actions, and deep down I knew she was scared. As the sun set that evening, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. I would walk into that courtroom with my head held high, ready to face the truth and reclaim my life. I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control. The day of the hearing arrived, and I woke up with a knot in my stomach. It felt like I was preparing for a war. In some ways, I was. I put on my best suit, the one that made me feel confident, and spent a few moments in front of the mirror, reminding myself that I had every right to be there. I wasn't just fighting for legal victory. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and my children. When I arrived at the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. I could see other couples milling around, many of them wearing expressions of defeat and sadness. But I had a mission, and I wasn't going to let that deter me. I caught sight of Sarah in the hallway, and my heart raced. She was dressed sharply, but there was something off about her demeanor. She looked nervous, almost vulnerable, as she fiddled with her hair and avoided making eye contact. As the clock ticked closer to our scheduled hearing, I met with Lisa in a private room. We reviewed the evidence one last time, going over our strategy. She encouraged me to stay calm and collected, reminding me that the court would take the evidence seriously. "This is your moment, Jake. Just remember why you're here," she said, giving me a supportive nod. I felt a mixture of nerves and determination. The thought of facing Sarah and Greg in the courtroom was daunting, but I was ready. I had spent countless hours preparing for this day, and I knew that I had the upper hand. When our case was called, I walked into the courtroom with Lisa by my side. The room was imposing, with high ceilings and rows of wooden benches filled with spectators. I took a deep breath as I sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that this would be the moment when everything changed. Sarah entered the room shortly after, her expression flickering between confidence and anxiety. Greg was right behind her, looking smug and too sure of himself. The sight of him made my blood boil, but I quickly reminded myself that today was about justice. I was not here to lose, I was here to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The judge entered and everyone stood. After taking his seat, he gestured for us to sit. It was time for the proceedings to begin. Lisa stood up first to present our case. "Your Honor, we have evidence that demonstrates the nature of the respondent's relationship with Mr. Smith, who is the petitioner's legal counsel," she stated firmly, glancing over at Sarah and Greg, who exchanged worried looks. As I watched Lisa lay out the evidence, displaying the photographs and playing the audio recordings, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I could see Sarah's face draining of color as the truth was revealed. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I could finally expose the lies. The judge listened attentively as Lisa presented each piece of evidence. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, and I knew that the truth was beginning to sink in. Sarah's attempts to defend herself were weak. She stumbled over her words as she tried to spin the narrative in her favor, but nothing could change the reality of her actions. "Your Honor, I was confused," Sarah finally stammered, her voice trembling. "It wasn't serious, it was just a mistake." I felt a mix of anger and pity. How could she stand there and minimize everything? My heart ached at the thought that she was still trying to manipulate the situation, but I also knew that the evidence spoke for itself. Lisa expertly countered each of Sarah's claims, dismantling her defense piece by piece. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood up, feeling a rush of adrenaline as I faced the judge and turned to Sarah. "I never thought I'd find myself in this position," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I want the court to understand that this isn't just about an affair. This is about trust, family, and the future of our children. Sarah's choices have consequences, and I have no choice but to protect our kids from a toxic environment." As I spoke, I could see the weight of my words hitting Sarah. Her face twisted in a mix of anger and despair as I laid bare the truth of our fractured family. I described how her actions had affected our children, how they deserved a stable home, and how I would fight to make sure they wouldn't be caught in the middle of this mess. By the time I finished, I felt a sense of catharsis. I had said everything I needed to say, and as I took my seat, I felt lighter. Lisa gave me a reassuring nod, and I could tell that we had made a strong case. As the proceedings continued, Sarah's demeanor shifted. The confidence she had walked in with was fading, replaced by a desperate need to salvage her image. She tried to appeal to the judge's sympathy, claiming that she was a good mother and that this affair was a momentary lapse in judgment. but every time she tried to humanize herself, the evidence stacked against her only made her look more pathetic. The judge eventually called a recess, giving us all a moment to breathe. I stepped outside into the hallway, feeling the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. I was doing this, and no matter the outcome, I was reclaiming my power. As I stood there, I glanced toward the exit and saw Sarah talking to Greg. Their whispers were frantic, and I could only imagine what she was saying. Did she think she could still manipulate the situation? It was almost laughable. When we returned to the courtroom, I felt a renewed sense of strength. The judge was ready to make his decision, and I knew that whatever happened next would shape the course of my life and my children's lives forever. As I sat there, waiting for the verdict, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had learned through this process. Betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, but it also revealed my own resilience. I was ready to move on, ready to take control of my life. The fight wasn't over yet, but I was determined to win this war. As the gavel came down, the courtroom fell into an intense silence. The judge's voice echoed off the walls as he began to deliver his ruling. I could feel my heart racing, anticipation mingling with anxiety. Sarah sat stiffly beside Greg, both of them tense, their eyes locked on the judge with a mix of hope and fear. After reviewing the evidence presented, it is clear that the actions of the respondent have had significant implications on the family dynamic. The judge began, his tone measured but firm. The court finds that the respondent's conduct has not been conducive to a healthy family environment. I barely heard the rest of his words as relief washed over me. He was siding with me. My heart swelled with vindication, knowing that I had fought hard for my children and for my own sense of justice. The judge continued, outlining the custody arrangements and financial support that would be put in place moving forward. It was a fair decision, and I could feel tears stinging my eyes. When the ruling was finalized, I glanced over at Sarah. Her face was a study in defeat, the bravado she had carried so confidently now shattered. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, satisfaction, and a strange sadness. I had won, but at what cost? Our family was irrevocably changed, and the kids would feel the repercussions of this for years to come. After the hearing, I stepped out into the bright sunlight, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I had envisioned this moment countless times, yet it felt surreal. Lisa joined me outside, her expression a mixture of accomplishment and empathy. "You did great in there, Jake. You stood up for yourself and your kids," she said, giving me a reassuring pat on the back. "Thank you," I replied, swallowing hard. "I just hope this is what's best for them." As I walked to my car, I saw Sarah and Greg standing off to the side, whispering animatedly. I had expected her to come rushing over, trying to salvage something, but instead she seemed to be in denial. Greg, with that smug look on his face, appeared to be trying to comfort her, but it was clear that the reality of our situation was settling in. "Jake," Sarah called out, her voice tinged with desperation. I turned slowly to face her, my heart still racing. "Can we talk about this? I think we can work things out. You don't have to be so harsh." "Work things out," I repeated, incredulity lacing my voice. "What would that even look like, Sarah? You cheated on me with my lawyer and you're asking me to work things out. I'm done trying to hold this family together when you've shown me you don't care about it." She looked taken aback, her eyes wide, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You're being unreasonable," she shot back, her tone defensive. "You're only thinking about yourself." "No, I'm thinking about our kids. They deserve better than this," I replied, my voice steady. "And I'm done playing the victim. I'm taking control of my life now." With that, I turned and walked away, feeling a mix of triumph and sadness. I had stood my ground, but part of me mourned for the family we had once been. It was easy to feel bitter, but as I drove away, I reminded myself that I had gained something much more important than a legal victory. I had regained my self-respect. In the following weeks, the reality of our divorce began to settle in. I moved out of the house, finding a cozy apartment not far from the kids' school. Leaving that home felt like a death. It was where we had built our lives together, but every corner of it was now tainted by betrayal. My new apartment, though smaller, felt like a fresh start. It was time to create a new home for me and my kids, a place where we could heal and grow. The first weekend in my new place, I had the kids over. They were nervous but excited to see their new space. I made pancakes for breakfast, and we spent the day doing activities together, playing board games, watching movies, and just enjoying each other's company. In those moments, I realized that despite everything that had happened, my love for them remained unshaken. I was determined to be the best father I could be. However, the road ahead was not all smooth sailing. Sarah made attempts to stir the pot, trying to make me look like the bad guy. She'd call me late at night, making accusations about my parenting, claiming I was trying to alienate the kids from her. Her lies were infuriating, but I remained calm. I knew the truth, and I had the court's backing. I refused to give in to her manipulation. One evening, as I was getting the kids ready for bed, I received a call from Lisa. "Jake, I think it's important we discuss a few things regarding the custody arrangements," she said, her voice serious. I could sense the urgency in her tone. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my heart sinking. "No, but I think you need to be prepared. There might be a motion filed by Sarah, lawyer, to contest the custody arrangement," she explained. "She doesn't want to lose her influence over the kids." My stomach dropped. I had anticipated that she might try to fight back, but I hadn't thought it would happen so soon. "What can I do?" I asked, feeling the familiar anger bubble beneath the surface. "Stay focused and gather any evidence of her behavior that might impact her ability to parent," Lisa advised. "Document everything. I'm here to support you, but you need to stand your ground." I thanked her and hung up the phone, feeling the weight of my responsibilities. I couldn't let Sarah's attempts to regain control derail my progress. I needed to keep my head clear and my priorities straight. My children needed me to be strong. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously documented every interaction I had with Sarah, keeping track of her erratic behavior and late-night phone calls. I stayed organized, knowing that the more evidence I had, the better my chances in court would be. Each day, I reminded myself that I was not just fighting for myself, I was fighting for the future of my children. As I settled into this new routine, I also discovered the power of support. I started attending a support group for men going through divorce, where I met others who had faced similar situations. Sharing my experiences and hearing theirs helped me process my emotions and reminded me that I wasn't alone. The laughter and camaraderie in those meetings provided a much-needed release from the tension of my everyday life. I began to realize that while the pain of betrayal would never fully disappear, it was possible to rebuild and find joy in the simplest of things, like cooking with my kids or enjoying a weekend in the park. As I reflected on the journey I had been on, I found a renewed sense of purpose. I was not just a victim of Sarah's betrayal. I was a man reclaiming his life. I was determined to show my children that resilience was possible, that even in the face of adversity, one could stand strong and fight for what they believed in. And as the next court date loomed ahead, I felt ready. I wouldn't just walk in there to defend my position. I would walk in there as a father who had fought for his family, ready to ensure that my children would always have a stable and loving home, no matter what. The day of the next court hearing crept up faster than I anticipated. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me: anticipation, anxiety, and a hint of defiance. I knew Sarah would be pulling out all the stops, trying to undermine my credibility as a father. But I was ready. My resolve had strengthened over the past few weeks, and I had prepared myself mentally for whatever she might throw my way. As I arrived at the courthouse, I found Lisa waiting for me in the lobby. She greeted me with a reassuring smile, and I felt a wave of comfort wash over me. "You've got this, Jake. Just remember to stay focused on what matters, your kids," she said as we walked toward the courtroom. Before entering, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I reminded myself that I was not just fighting for custody. I was fighting for a stable life for my children. This was about securing their future, and I wouldn't let Sarah's desperation cloud my judgment. When we walked into the courtroom, I could see Sarah and Greg already seated, their expressions a mix of arrogance and concern. Greg was whispering something to Sarah, trying to bolster her confidence, but I couldn't help but notice the tension in her posture. She was clearly nervous, and part of me felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing that the tables had turned. The judge entered, and we all stood as he took his seat. Once we were settled, the proceedings began. Lisa stood up first, presenting our case with clarity and conviction. She laid out the evidence I had gathered over the past weeks, texts, emails, and documentation that showcased Sarah's erratic behavior and lack of stability. The judge listened intently, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the materials. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, I could see the panic in her eyes. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming that I was trying to alienate the children from her. "Your Honor, I love my kids. I want to be a part of their lives," she asserted, her voice quivering. "This is all just Jake trying to push me out because he's angry." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I maintained my composure. Lisa shot me a reassuring glance, reminding me to stay focused. I knew this was a tactic Sarah had used before, and I was determined not to let it affect me. The judge asked Sarah about her late-night outings and the instability in her life. "You've been seen out late on numerous occasions, and there are concerns about your ability to provide a safe environment for your children. How do you respond to that?" he inquired, his tone serious. Sarah stumbled over her words, trying to deflect the questions. "I was just going through a tough time, Your Honor. I needed to unwind. It didn't mean I was irresponsible." "Unwind?" the judge pressed. "Are you saying that your social life should take precedence over your responsibilities as a mother?" In that moment, I felt a surge of hope. The judge was seeing through Sarah's excuses, recognizing the truth behind her claims. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "Stay strong. You're doing great." Finally, it was my turn to speak again. I stood up, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Your Honor, I've done my best to ensure that our children have a stable environment since the separation. I've made sacrifices to be present for them, and my priority has always been their well-being," I stated firmly, looking directly at the judge. "I've documented everything, and I can provide evidence of Sarah's unstable behavior over the past few months. I believe that our children will thrive in a consistent and nurturing environment, one that I can provide." As I spoke, I glanced at Sarah, who looked increasingly agitated. I could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade. Her demeanor shifted from defensive to desperate, and I knew I was getting under her skin. The judge nodded, seemingly considering my words carefully. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. We will take all of this into account. However, it is essential to remember that while this court does not take divorce lightly, the welfare of the children is paramount." As the hearing continued, I watched the dynamics shift. It was as if the room was filled with an electric tension, and I felt the balance of power tilt in my favor. The evidence I presented painted a clear picture of Sarah's instability, and the judge seemed to be leaning toward granting me primary custody. Just when I thought things couldn't get any better, Sarah's attorney pulled out a last-minute bombshell. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been using this divorce as an opportunity to undermine my client's relationship with their children. He has been recording conversations without consent, which is both unethical and illegal." The room fell silent, and my heart sank. I hadn't recorded anything without consent, but Sarah's attorney was attempting to craft a narrative that would vilify me. I could see Sarah's eyes glimmer with hope, as if she believed this would turn the tide. Lisa's expression turned serious as she quickly leaned in to strategize. "Jake, don't panic. We can counter this. We'll present the evidence clearly and show that your intentions were only to protect the children." When the judge asked for clarification, I stood my ground. "Your Honor, I have documented communications between myself and Sarah regarding the children's welfare, and I have never recorded anything that would compromise her privacy. This is merely a desperate tactic to distract from the real issue." I could feel the tension in the room as the judge contemplated the new information. After a short recess, he returned, looking more resolved than ever. "It is clear that both parties have strong opinions about their involvement with their children. However, it is the court's duty to ensure that these children are placed in the best environment possible." He went on to summarize the evidence presented and the testimonies heard. Given the circumstances, I'm inclined to grant primary custody to Mr. Mitchell, with visitation rights for Ms. Mitchell, contingent on her maintaining a stable lifestyle. A wave of relief washed over me as the words sank in. I had done it. I had fought against insurmountable odds, and I was being awarded primary custody. It was a victory, not just for myself but for my children. I glanced at Sarah, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of defeat and despair in her eyes. As the judge concluded the proceedings, I felt a mixture of triumph and grief. Yes, I had won, but the cost was still high. I glanced at Lisa, who beamed with pride. "You did it, Jake. You stood up for your kids, and now you can provide them with the stability they need." As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the burden of the past start to lift. I was finally free from the toxic web Sarah had woven, free to focus on rebuilding my life and being the father my kids deserved. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As I stepped into the sunlight, I could feel a wave of optimism wash over me. I was determined to create a new chapter for my family, one built on love, trust, and resilience. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. After the court hearing, everything began to settle into a new normal. I had one primary custody, and as I drove home that day, a sense of peace enveloped me. The battle was hard fought, but the war was over, and I was ready to focus on my children and what lay ahead. The first few weeks in my new routine were filled with adjustments. The kids were still adjusting to the changes, navigating between their mom's house and mine. I made it a priority to ensure that they felt secure and loved, free from the chaos that had defined their lives during the divorce. I planned their favorite meals, organized movie nights, and made weekends special with outings to the park or family game nights. It was important to me that they knew they were my priority and that nothing would come between us. Sarah, on the other hand, struggled to cope with the loss of our family dynamic. Her calls became less frequent, and when she did reach out, it was often filled with resentment or attempts to shift blame. I had expected this. I knew she wouldn't take her loss gracefully, but I remained firm, focused solely on what was best for our children. One night, after a particularly fun evening filled with laughter and board games, I tucked the kids into bed and sat down to reflect. I could hear their soft breathing from the next room, a soothing reminder that everything I had done was worthwhile. I thought about how far I had come since the betrayal, from shock and heartbreak to empowerment and resolution. I had transformed my pain into a powerful catalyst for change, and I was proud of that. But even with the peace I found in my new role, there were moments of sadness. I often thought about the family I once had, the dreams we shared, and the future we envisioned together. I remembered the love we had before it all fell apart. It was bittersweet, and I had to remind myself that I had made the right choice for my children. I couldn't allow nostalgia to cloud the reality of Sarah's actions. One day, a few months after the ruling, I received an unexpected call from Sarah. She wanted to meet to discuss the kids and co-parenting arrangements. I hesitated but eventually agreed, knowing that open communication was crucial for the kids' sake. It was time to put aside our differences and focus on what truly mattered. We met at a local cafe, and I could see the tension in her posture as she sat across from me. I took a deep breath and prepared for the conversation, knowing her anger and resentment would likely surface. "I just wanted to say that I'm trying to be a better mother," she started, her voice unsteady. "I realize that I made mistakes, but I want to work together for our kids." I nodded, surprised by her admission. "I appreciate you saying that, Sarah. Our kids need us to be civil and to prioritize their well-being above everything else." I felt a sense of cautious optimism. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me but for her as well. Over the next few weeks, we began to develop a co-parenting plan that worked for both of us. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension and disagreement. But we both recognized that our children needed stability, and that pushed us to communicate more effectively. I found myself starting to view Sarah not just as my ex-wife, but as a co-parent. We set a schedule for visits, discussed activities for the kids, and even agreed to attend school events together. As the months passed, I noticed a gradual transformation in our interactions. Sarah seemed to be genuinely trying to improve her relationship with the kids and to be more present in their lives. There were still underlying issues that needed addressing, but I was willing to work on them for the sake of our children. One day, while driving the kids home from a soccer game, I overheard them talking about how much they appreciated the time we spent together as a family. It warmed my heart to hear their laughter, the sound of their joy filling the car. I realized that despite the challenges we faced, we were carving out a new identity, one that wasn't defined by betrayal but instead by resilience and love. Reflecting on everything I had gone through, I felt gratitude for the lessons learned. I had discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, and I was finally free to pursue the life I wanted. I had learned to prioritize my well-being and my children's happiness above all else. As I stood by the soccer field watching the kids play, I caught sight of Sarah cheering from the sidelines. She looked genuinely happy, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had both made mistakes, but we were both committed to moving forward, and that was what mattered. In the end, I realized that life is unpredictable, and sometimes heartbreak can lead to growth and new beginnings. I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that while the past would always be a part of me, it did not have to define my story. I was not just a man who had been betrayed. I was a father who had fought for his kids, and I was determined to build a life filled with love, laughter, and resilience. And as I cheered for my kids, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together as a family, stronger than before.